you clearly.
Perfect.
Okay, now it's good to go. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. It's been an interesting week down south, and I've probably been watching too much CNN, so I'm glad to be joining this meeting today to get away from a little bit. My name is Wiseman, and I'm the chair of the board of directors of the Atmospheric Fund. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, so I'd like to now call TAF board meeting 9 to order. Welcome, everyone. This meeting is being held using the city's WebEx technology, with members and staff connecting by video conference or call-in. Because we are meeting remotely, we ask for your patience with any delays and technical issues. Members of the public can observe the meeting on YouTube. I also ask that all members and staff keep their microphones on mute unless you need to answer a question or speak. If any members do wish to speak, please make sure your video is on and raise your hand, or unmute your mic and indicate your intention to speak, and I will create a speakers list. When voting, I ask that members make sure that your video is turned on and raise your hands to indicate your vote. Members, I want to remind you that if you have any motions, please send them in writing to the clerk at taftboard@toronto.ca. Although we are meeting remotely, the board of directors of the Toronto Atmospheric Fund acknowledges the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Hearing none, thank you. Before I start the formal part of the meeting, I do want to mention today is Deepak's last board meeting. I'd like to thank him for his service. I know he's agreed to accept continued work with TAF in a more informal basis. So I'd like to really thank Deepak for thanks, Julia. Is that any better?
Can we unmute and virtually applaud?
Sure,
Thank you for everything, Deepak.
Oh, well, happy to help and looking forward to helping, I think, a little more concretely in an informal role.
Julia, did you mention my webcam? Is that any better? Thank you. All right, next we need a motion to confirm the minutes from our meeting on July 27th, 2020. Can I have someone to move? I can't see everyone.
Moved.
Okay.
Councillor Carroll, so moved.
Thank you. All those in favor?
No problem.
Carried. So we have 10 items on the agenda today. Let's proceed with the agenda in the order the items are listed. The first item is TA 9.1, Chief Executive Officer's Report. I'll ask TAF CEO Julia to provide an overview of her report.
There we go. Great, thank you. Without being repetitive, I do want to be repetitive and thank Deepak for his contribution to the board over the past year. Deepak has been a very long-time friend of TAF, lots of expertise, and I will appreciate the ongoing support and ideas and enthusiasm for the mandate, and we'll draw on that as Parminder said, just in terms of a less formal but still very important contribution. So thanks, Deepak. On that note, because of Deepak's resignation and Laurel's resignation earlier, we had 2 positions to fill, and I've been engaged with the Civic Appointments Committee. We had, again, a very impressive and strong list of applicants. And I had the opportunity, as is the sort of normal practice now, to help the staff with shortlisting. I understand that interviews are going to be held perhaps even this week. I'm not exactly sure about the timings. I think they selected 9 candidates to interview. So we are moving to have the positions filled before our next board meeting. And it just is so interesting, just to see where the applications come from. It really gives us an opportunity also to look at candidates who might be great on the Grants and Programs Committee or the Investment Committee. And often the recruitment that we do to the board, as many of you will know, is through our committees. It builds familiarity with the mandate and with the operations. So it is it's something where it sort of does double duty, and we'll take that on board as the civic appointments process completes its work. And as many of the investment committee members will know, I just want to convey this to the board. We do have a new member, but observer, non-voting member of the investment committee. So Jeremy Klein representing FCM. And I checked in with him, and Kim and I talked about this. He's feeling quite. It's a lot of information for somebody who does mostly the marketable securities. So very interested in our direct investment work. And what I think is going to be interesting from Jeremy's participation is that he's also the observer on the investment committee of all the other LC3 centers, so Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, Montreal, Halifax. And so this will be just another way of us getting the benefit of the network, of the LC3 network. And so it's just kind of a learning new process, but I think with great value added for us. So I think there's a few of our staff are participating on this remote meeting, but we have a lot of engagement through remote means. We've been able to sort of meet in parks, so the team is really sort of sticking together and sort of getting the work done. So it seems busier than ever, and we have some new recruitment happening. We paused it in the spring based on market conditions and just not knowing what would be happening with our revenues. But I did want to, aside from just saying that we've unpaused those 3, 2 of the positions were vacant, and one was a new one that was planned for quite a while. So that's interesting. But what's especially interesting is the process that we're using. And we provided a link to Applied, which is a platform that really is it's consistent with our equity, diversity, inclusion program and policy and commitment, and it aims to take the bias out of hiring, so you don't get CVs. What you get is responses to job-related questions, and so Jamie and Julie and Evan have been plowing through quite a few. I think we received upwards of almost 600 applications for the 3 positions. But there's finding that it does make the work easier, so you're not having to plow through the sort of CVs. You're actually looking at the quality of people's responses to work-related questions. So we're now going through the shortlisting. So it's an experiment. We'll have some analysis of how that went with our first use of it, but it really it's quite different. So this is on the risk analysis. This is a new segment of my report. It's going to be a regular part of my report to the board because if you recall back in May, we presented a draft risk register that reflected the core risks that we feel are relevant to TAF. It was certainly something that Antoine in particular had raised probably over a year ago. We started working on it, but it was good that we'd started working on it because it is a condition of our funding agreement with FCM. So we really sort of bore down and put that together. And so what I'm highlighting here is we're doing it. It depends on the risk, but sometimes it requires a monthly or a quarterly or an annual sort of look-see. And so what I will do is based on the analysis, which we will be doing on those relevant intervals, is just highlight for you what are some of the higher ranking. I'm not just going to go rote on every one of the. Can't remember how many we had. Ian, remind me. It's sort of in the order of 10 specific risks, but just the ones I think are notable from a governance perspective. So. Obviously, on the financial side, the markets were a challenge in terms of our projected revenues, but Q3, you're going to hear a bit more from Rob, but Q3 results give us a sort of strong trajectory for reducing what was a very significant projected shortfall. And Rob might have want to steal his thunder, but he was doing some further projections based on end of October results. And it looks like we might be, as long as November and December are not nasty, that we might end up based on even with projections. So, this is something we always obviously need to monitor as a risk, but not feeling as stressed about it today as we were even a month ago in terms of that projected shortfall. So those 2 points there. On the operational risk side, we're always looking at, we depend so much. Given today and looking at our board meeting, we couldn't have it if we had, IT disruption, in any significant way, within our internal systems, we really rely on it. And so we've been doing some further briefings about how to prevent IT disruptions. And we're also looking at a migration to the cloud. We've had a server, we've had to upgrade it. It's so central, like you just don't realize how, we've had some disruptions and it's been annoying, but it could be much more than annoying if it's not handled properly. So we're on that one. And then we feel that reputational risk is something we always need to be aware of, both actions by staff, by board, by committees, and then even broader now by LC3 colleagues, because we're part of this network. And so, that relates to comments or financial challenges. And so what we've looked at now is, and Parminder will probably be familiar with this, is we've been updating a lot of our signatory policies, how we get signatures in an electronic context, just making sure that all of the banking, we now have 3 funds and 3 accounts for each of those funds. So there's been some significant work there to avoid, because this was flagged as a potential risk, and to avoid it. So I didn't want to belabor that, but and I won't every time, but I did want to introduce you to how we're going to undertake this on a go-forward basis, and happy to have any comments about how this is presented. And anyways, it's we just need to sort of have a continuous improvement approach to this. And then I did also want to let you know that, and our colleagues from the city manager's office and CFO's office have been involved in this. We have a conversation ongoing with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs regarding several aspects of our transfer payment agreement implementation and some issues that they flagged. And we've all agreed that we need to work together to resolve them. Some of it has to do with definitions in the DPA vis-a-vis administrative expenses and how we proportionately or disproportionately share those, about accounting and how we treat our externally restricted and internally restricted funds, so as not to the wording is use or spend the proceeds. So in other words, the 17 million that the province provided must not be used or spent. It must be preserved. And we had an issue in terms of the 2018 and 2019 treatment of the funds in the financial statements based on GAAP. Rob can give you much more detail about this, but we agree that these issues arose and are working to resolve them in order to have much more robust and clear procedures. And we'll write those down and so that everybody knows how it's going to be dealt with. But so the city, the province, and TAF are working together on that. And then on the funding agreement for the Canada funds, we've received the money. As you know, we have a lot of reporting that's going to start coming up. So our first quarterly report will be for the period ending December 31st. And so we're starting to get all the templates and all of our internal tools ready to undertake that. So there's a lot of sort of back office work happening for implementation of our various funding agreements. Hopefully the information about all the programs is interesting and useful to you. We've tried to put in some links there to some of the latest reports, which we've had from the Towerwise team, for instance. We've had really good response to these, and the activity is underway at various construction sites, getting that retrofit equipment in. A lot of it is really pushing for the winter season so that everybody will have heat, nice clean heat. And there's some new work that's happening. We were part of a bid with WSP to advise the Canada Infrastructure Bank about financing. I'm sure you noticed they announced quite a big tranche of funding. If it was a $10 billion pool for electrification of transportation, retrofits, renewable energy, and I think some grid transmission work. But $4 billion was for retrofits, 2 in private sort of commercial side, 2 on the public side. So we're advising on the public side. So that's really drawing on a lot of the great work that the Towerwise team and the impact investing team has done. You're going to hear a bit more from Evan about our policy work, and with a focus on some of the Whitby Green Standard. And we have a colleague from Whitby who will tag team with him on that, so I won't go into that. Lots of activity on the impact investing side. We've had, there's a couple of issues that we're really working hard to resolve. One with the YMCA, just in terms of some equipment challenges. And so we have a process underway with the Y and with the equipment supplier to resolve that. And also there's some solar thermal projects, which again, we're working really hard to resolve there on city facilities. So we've got some help with on that from a solar thermal expert. Nobody does solar thermal anymore because there was so much interest in solar PV, but we're hoping that some of the work that we've done will actually sort of come back. Everything old is new again. And then some updates on our communication side. My report always, as per the transfer payment agreement, has updates on completed grants. If you had any questions about those of course go to the Grants and Programs Committee, but in more detail. But this is a snapshot for the full board. So that's really, there was a lot to report this quarter rather, I felt, and all of this will be sort of helpful also in terms of the 2020 update report that we provide to you in February at our upcoming meeting, along with our 2021 business plan. So we collect it all, provide it to you as a snapshot, but then we'll do some further analysis about what worked and what didn't, and insights from that when we do the 2020 report. So that's any questions, happy to answer or turn it over to staff who helped me compile this report.
Thank you, Julia. Does anyone have any questions of staff on this item then?
I just have one. Can I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Just have one question. I sort of got distracted when I was reading the report from the CEO report because I hadn't read the case for deep retrofits report before. I hadn't had the time. I know it went up on the website and we were sort of attracted to it, but I didn't have time to look at it until I was reading this agenda, and it's great. So what I'm wondering is, what are we doing with that other than just putting it on our own posts? Is it going out to the other LC3s? Are we blasting it out through other platforms, or just hoping to draw people to our platform?
Well, we do have quite a big stakeholder list that we've been working with on retrofits, certainly within the GTHA, but the LC3 network as well. We've shared it with utilities, with building owners, and that's why we share it with you, because you probably have other networks that might be interested in this. It's certainly helping us with the work that we're doing with WSP to support Canada Infrastructure Bank and Infrastructure Ontario in terms of their how they structure financing for retrofits, because the real message is that people are leaving money on the table. So if you're not looking at the full business case, if you're not looking at optimizing the return on investment, then you go for just short-term payback kinds of measures, and that doesn't optimize your return or the carbon reduction opportunity. And then a step further, we didn't quantify this, but what I think is worth looking at is those non-financial, the things that are not monetized in the usual business case, where the improvement for health, the job creation opportunities. And if we could actually monetize those and bring those into the retrofit equation, then we would actually be able to go even further in terms of savings, carbon reduction, plus those other social benefits that are not generally in the business case box.
Right. Well, that was the thing, and first of all, highlighting that, I was putting here's the monetary and the non-monetary. It was all really I think from the building owner perspective, the easiest, the sort of easiest, most user friendly layout ever for them to figure out how to build their own business case. And I just wanted to make sure if we do a piece of work like that, that's great. But that now it pushes out even faster and farther by going out through the LC3s. Yeah.
Right. So if anybody has specific ideas and opportunities, Julie is always on deck to build that into our distribution plan. And just given the interest, and just a shout out to Devin Calder, who was the lead on this, and the whole Towerwise team, who have drawn on literally 10 years plus of activity to pull this together. And I think it's leading edge work. Because we're a public agency, I do not doubt that many other organizations have this kind of information, but as a public organization, we share it. And I think that is kind of what will, and the other thing on the point about information, we just did a little mini workshop internally because we're trying to inform ourselves about what is it that gets us scale, what gets commercialization type scale. And we have a bit of a mantra right now that information alone, it does not cut it. We can have this is fantastic information, but it alone will not move the dial, because people have other barriers that they face. Or, if you want to go faster, you need a requirement to say at time of sale or at time of upgrade or building permit that you actually have to do these retrofits. So we need information plus policy plus training so that the workforce is there, plus the financing in a structure that is going to be amenable to the building owners. So information is one piece of it. We have it, we got it, but it's not enough. It's necessary, but not sufficient.
Thank you, Julia. Any other questions? I don't know whether it's my setting. I don't see everybody on the screen, so I have a hard time figuring out if anyone has raised their hand. Okay, I see the committee room. All right, I don't see anyone else with any questions. I do have a couple of thoughts and a question for you, Julia. One, very much looking forward to learning more about Taft's experience with Applied. I think that's such a neat and cool initiative, and wondering how you guys feel about it after you use it in the hiring process and the results, whether it worked out for you. So look forward to that a little bit later. In terms of a couple of other things, the 3 fund accounting, really interested to find out how that all rolls out. And it sounds like you guys got that well under control, and but really want to learn a little bit more about that at some point to see if we're just making sure we're all in compliance there. The risk side, that's fantastic, and I think that's a very, very important element that we need to build out a little bit more. This is a fantastic start to it. Kudos to Antoine for pushing this as well. The one question I've got regarding that is one risk I think that we should probably include as a comment almost every time, and it could say not applicable, but perhaps is legal risk. Because I noticed in this one we do have this YMCA. I don't know exactly all the details behind that, but even it could just be none. That's just one that, for me anyways, it'd be important to just say, okay, yeah, we've got no exposure there, and then it's someone's thought through to put none. The other side I noticed in the report was there are some performance risks, if I can use that term, and I don't know whether you categorize those as operational, but even though COVID hasn't impacted the internal operations of TAF, it seems like it's definitely impacted the programs and grants, because I thought I saw 4 that had issues related to COVID that perhaps they weren't able to disseminate their findings or outcomes to policymakers, and that seemed to be a little bit of a reoccurring theme. So maybe to bubble those up a little bit, because I think that's got both operational but reputational risks. Because if we provided grant funding, and the probably the most important element of that is once we've got those outcomes, how do we make sure that they're disseminated and perfectly understandable that COVID had some issues to it, but we still have to figure out what's the mitigations on those. The part that maybe a question on that is, part of me says, well, these policymakers, at least for some period of time, after adapting to working from home and everything else, probably had some free time, but at the same time, I'm sure they, priorities and things change. So as well. So, did you get any feedback of, is it just a lack that they weren't interested anymore, or they just had higher priorities? Like, what was causing policymakers to be unavailable? Is it just COVID was top of mind and everything else was just not as important?
I'm not exactly sure in what question you're referring to. Oh, you mean on some of the policy work?
Yeah, the policy program. It seems like there's a theme that I think there was 4 that I noticed that okay, we just couldn't get a hold of policymakers or something. And I think the real driver was COVID, and we're not sensing any lack of interest, certainly at the federal level in terms of the climate and energy side of things. Just also, there's a certain amount of paralysis, like there is no budget. So we're talking about programs, and they're like, no budget, you have to wait, just have to see. And so certain things that have a trajectory, like the clean fuel standard, there is activity going on. Other new things, not so much. So I think that's probably, Shelley's nodding, there's just a lot of sort of rebalancing. What we're glad about is that, at least on the federal government, there doesn't seem to be any trade-offs happening. So we still do feel very strongly that there is that the narrative that just because we have a COVID crisis doesn't mean we ignore the climate crisis is still very strong and very positive in terms of prospective policy and programs and investment. So that's certainly not a challenge. And this goes maybe back, Parminder, to your point about the risk register, is that, and I appreciate the feedback on the approach. So rather than providing like the big table of all of the risks and sort of, because we are going to have to look at some of them, as I say, monthly, some of them quarterly. I've highlighted the ones where we said, oh, there's something to do here, rather than a not applicable kind of approach. So I guess it's your call from the board's perspective as to what you wish to see. Sure. Yeah, we can have a conversation about that. To me, just legal is one of the ones that if there's any litigation that's fine. The other ones I'm good with, other than if there are some performance issues that we should probably because the other side of the risk then ought to be mitigation. And right now, I think you had to read below, but we'll talk about that. Thanks.
Okay.
Great. Any other last questions?
Yeah, just had a question. Thanks so much, Julia. I just wanted to check in. You mentioned a bit in the report around the staffing up and also the number of contracts that we have now. So I just wanted to get a sense of how the culture of the organization is now that this is, and how the workforce is feeling now that this is, the remote work is probably dragging on far longer. People expected, and you're now integrating new team members in a variety of capacities remotely.
Great. Jamie, are you participating in this? Because maybe Jamie can give you a little snapshot, because she's been doing regular check-ins with the team. Yeah, I'm here. Let me just start the video. Hi.
You.
We've been doing regular check-ins with the staff. It's taken, obviously, an adjustment getting all used to this new situation. I did a check-in with all staff about a month ago, seeing how everyone's doing, how home setup is, and the feeling is we're doing okay. No one's happy to be working at home. We miss the office. We miss face-to-face interaction. We miss drop-by opportunities to solve problems really quickly. But everybody's settled in. Folks who were dealing with having little kids at home have sort of figured out how to balance life and are helped out by daycare and school being back. And our managers are regularly checking in with their teams and feeding back into the senior management team, checking in on how work is going and just checking in to see how our people are doing, because it's a challenging time. Everybody has their layers of COVID stuff that makes this time harder, but it seems like we're doing okay. The applied process has been interesting. I look forward to updating everybody after we have amazing people in the door, because we're just at the we love the platform stage. But we'll see what kind of folks we get from this process. And the operations team is spending a lot of time thinking about how we will onboard these people, get them ready for their roles, and welcome them to the team that they're not going to meet in person for a while. So we're spending a lot of time thinking about that and preparing for new folks who will join end of this year, beginning of next year. Yeah, I would say thanks, Jamie. Jamie's been doing a fantastic job of keeping everybody connected and solving people's problems. We offered a stipend to staff, it wasn't sort of just provide your receipt. It was what do you need? Give us an estimate of, what it might cost. We had upper limits. Because it was challenging at the beginning, just the technology setup or your space or whatever, different people have different issues and needed to solve them. So I think that was really appreciated. I do think that the onboarding is going to be a particular challenge. So much of our TAF work is teamwork. Rob is a perfect example. Rob Watton, our director of finance, he spent a month in the office before we all went home. And, and so it's kind of a bit of a snapshot, and he's dealing with everybody in the organization. So that, I really, have myself and others, it's important that we help each other. And I think that kind of culture really does exist. I'm happy to say, but it is harder. So it's work.
It's good to hear. All right. I don't see any other questions. So may I have someone to move the receipt of this information? Again, I can't. Jennifer, Carol, you'll have to help me out. Okay, I see someone.
Arminder, it's Kim. I'll move.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, the next item is TA 9.1, Climate Policy and the Whitby Green Development Standard. I believe there's a presentation for this item. I'll ask Julia to introduce the presentation.
Great, good. So we have a presentation that's focused on TAF's climate policy work. We decided should be the focus on the heels of the adoption of the Whitby Green Standard, which we were very involved in. But our involvement was very much on a trajectory leading back to more than 10 years ago and our experience with the City of Toronto. So I will turn it over to Evan Wiseman to do the presentation, and we have a guest from a colleague from Whitby who he will introduce as well. And we'll run through that, and I'm sure if you have questions, both of them will be able to answer, as will Brian, who leads the policy and programs team.
Morning. Get my video. There we go. Good morning. Just waiting for the presentation to come up. Oh, great. So my name is Evan Wiseman. I will be doing most of the presentation along with Jade Schofield from the town of Whitby. So I'll just jump right into the presentation. So if we could go to the next slide. So Brian, you all know very well. He's the Vice President of Policy and Programs. Again, my name is Evan Wiseman. I've been working at TAF for just about a year now. Prior to joining TAF, I worked as a government relations consultant and a staffer on Parliament Hill before moving back to Toronto and joining the team. So this year we're going to be up to 3 members in the policy team. So we're going to also have a policy coordinator, which, as Julia mentioned, we're in the process of hiring through the applied system. For the policy coordinator position, we received over 200 applications. So we're working through those right now. So it's really excited to see who we end up with. So go to the next slide. So why TAF does policy work was a big question we wanted to try and address in this presentation. And so policy provides the greatest opportunity and has yielded the greatest results to date in the GTHA for carbon reductions. Provincial rules around waste pertaining to methane and sequestration and destruction and the coal phase out were both policy decisions as examples that have accounted for the largest carbon reductions since baseline in the GTHA. These policies were only possible because of, you can see the 3 years there on the right side that we really feel work in tandem together. But these policies were only possible because of research and demonstrations were both done in cases and engagement, capacity building and financing that were made available. And then climate policy drove the large scale carbon reduction. So like I said, it's not one or the other in our view. It's all of them working together in tandem. So if we go to the next slide. So this is how we approach to doing policy, and so we advocate, educate, collaborate, and we innovate. TAF has always filled an important role in policy discussions with various levels of government. Where we were very careful not to just say, hey, you have this problem, you should fix it, and then not offer some sort of advice or assistance or solution to the problem. We always work, we advocate on trying to fix a problem, we try to provide education where needed, we always collaborate, and then we end up always innovating. Our policy work, our policy advice, rather, might not always be adopted, but we're always successful in promoting the value of evidence-based, nonpartisan solutions through an urban climate lens. And so we convene and collaborate with diverse sectors and partners in hopes of making connections between climate action and multiple public priorities. And this is all levels of government, federal, provincial, and the municipal as well, including local and regional levels outside of Toronto and in Toronto, obviously, as well. So if we can go to the next slide. And so this is more about how we work. This is a bit more of the nitty gritty in terms of compliance. So compliance with all regulatory governance and financial requirements that TAF has with the city relationship framework includes to act as an advocate with other orders of government. Like I said before, and I just want to emphasize, strictly nonpartisan. Where we are integrated with demonstration as a policy team with impact investing, capacity building, grant making, and all other TAF teams to try and drive carbon reductions. And that's really our goal. It's always as Julia says often and sometimes daily to us, you got to follow the carbon, and that's really what we focus on as a policy team. So if we can go to the next slide. And so it's just a short list of the current active policy files. This doesn't include a number of other files that are kind of on the side of our desks that we hope to get to very soon. But the Green Development Standard, expansion and defense, and so that's expansion and increases in Toronto, but then in the GTHA, but then also defending the gains that we've gotten. The Clean Fuel Standard, which we sometimes refer to as the most sizable policy decision that no one's ever heard of with the federal government, which I'm happy to get into. It's a very complex, extensive policy issue. We have been doing contributions to both the federal and provincial budget submissions recently, multiple in each cases to COVID and just kind of the reality of how things have worked. We've been contributing also to the off-peak delivery commitments that the provincial government has made through the Main Street Recovery Act, and that is allowing for off-peak deliveries, which will help reduce carbon and congestion. Numerous OEB projects, including demand-side management, conservation-side management, being seized on various pipelines in the GTHA, other issues as well, just that the OEB looks at and tackles, and as a regulatory body is sometimes it takes a long period of time to do work on. And then ongoing support for impact investment and the grants teams so that we stay integrated with them carefully. So if we can go to the next slide. And so this is, we really thought it would be best to kind of do a spotlight on one of the issues in particular, and we thought we'd bring up the Green Development Standard since there was a recent big win in Whitby, which I will let Jade speak more to in a minute. In terms of the taft side, so I'm sure as many of you are aware, taft's history with the Green Condo Loan provided better building code, was cost effective, and created industry champions for the Toronto Green Standard, version 1, adopted in 2010 under Mayor Miller. Taft worked with the City of Toronto to develop and advance adoption of Toronto Green Standards in version 2 and 3 in 2014 under Mayor Ford, 2018 under Mayor Tory, and then the TGS has been the single biggest measure in Transform TO in terms of a climate plan, and has the potential to really reduce, actually prevent carbon emissions from occurring in the first place, which is the goal. And so the next steps for that are continuing to stay seized on the development of the Toronto Green Standard, but then also making sure that the green standards expand outside of just Toronto and into the GTHA more broadly. So if we can go to the next slide. And so I will leave it to Jade to talk about Whitby and the awesome work that she and the staff have done there. They just did a really incredible job, and I don't want to steal any of her thunder, so I'll let her introduce herself and talk a little bit about the Whitby experience around the Green Development Standard.
Thanks, Evan, and thank you to the TAFT board for having me today. I'll keep it brief, but I do want to celebrate with the Atmospheric Fund a great win that the town of Whitby recently absorbed, which was a unanimous endorsement of a tiered green development standard, also known as the Whitby Green Standard. This green standard mirrors the mechanism of the Toronto Green Standard that was developed all those years ago. However, and it aligns its carbon reduction goals quite closely. We have a similar plan in place here in the region of Durham. As you know, we're a two-tier municipality. And in 2019, we passed a Durham Community Energy Plan, which was a collaborative local and regional and utility kind of conception similar to the Transform TO plan. And one of the action items out of that was a region-wide green development standard. That came up against a number of challenges. However, Whitby decided to take this on wholeheartedly, and we developed a program that is different to every other municipality other than the City of Toronto, in the sense that it is a tiered approach. it sets a vision all the way to the year 2036 as to how we are going to meet our greenhouse gas emission targets, which is the 80 by 50 target in alignment with the City of Toronto. However, the Green Standard isn't an exact replica. The development landscape here in our community is very different to that of Toronto, so we weren't able to completely mirror all of the items in there. Instead, we actually took much of an approach towards greenfield development, low-rise development, which is the majority of development that we see here in our community. And those green standards are there to really help advance that type of design criteria. And I couldn't go without thanking TAF for all of the support throughout the development and passing of the Green Development Standards. They were absolutely instrumental to doing this. One of the challenging things as a municipal staff representative, as much as I'm very much a climate change and environmental expert and activist in my personal life, there is definitely a fine line between activism and being politically correct within the corporation of the town I'm representing. So when we're up against challenges in bringing forward such a big project, a policy tool like a green standard, we really need as much support as we can get. And support isn't just in the sense of advocacy, but it's also in the sense of education. And the Atmospheric Fund by far led the way in educating our community, educating our politicians, and educating decision makers to let them know that this is the right thing to be doing. And it really helped, because typically when you announce something like a policy change, it doesn't tend to have a huge amount of traction within the community. It's just not something the public picks up on. And they don't necessarily connect the dots of how it can impact them in their future. However, those that are pushing back on such a tool are very loud, and they typically make themselves known and have the ability to access politicians and share their story. So, having TAF there to support us was able to support the initiative, allowed us to actually equal that balance. So when there's a concern for a policy, TAF was there to also be able to rationale and provide that security that this is something that council can move forward with. And to be honest, I don't think this would have gone through if it wasn't for TAF's social media campaigns, their meeting with councils, and their general just rallying up the troops to come out and provide delegations or letters of support for the initiative. It really was mind-blowing to see how much support that was generated as a result of the Atmospheric Fund's involvement. It's really exciting to see that we have the Green Standard in place. However, we're not over all of the challenges yet. Getting it through council was one thing. The implementation is definitely our next biggest challenge over the next 12 months. We are going to be working with all of our stakeholders to develop an incentive program. It's not going to be the same as the City of Toronto. We just don't have the same access to development charges to be able to do those rebates. So we are reaching out once again for partnerships to help develop a program that works well for Whitby and a landscape and other landscapes similar to Whitby. I'm really excited to let you know that other municipalities since the endorsement of the Green Standard have been reaching out to me far and wide, looking to mirror what Whitby has done. So I'm really hoping to see that, especially later in 2021, at least 5 municipalities that I'm aware of kind of moving forward with a similar initiative. With that being said, we are still seeing pressure and pushback from the home builders community. And, that means that we do need to continue to have a voice and share the benefits and engage and educate the community so that the naysayers are also equally met with those that can rationale and demonstrate why it is we're doing this and what the community benefits are. So I do anticipate the next 12 months being very difficult, but we are energized and motivated by the fact that our municipal council has supported this wholeheartedly. So with that, I'll pass it over to Evan. Just wrapping up again, thank you, Evan, Brian, Julia, for all of your hard work over the last 6 to 8 months on working on this file here in Whitby. And I look forward to hopefully working with you to help other municipalities do the same thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Jade. And Jade and the team at Whitby just made it really easy to work with on this. I would say they did an incredible job. They did so much to the foundation and the hard work that it made it very easy to help push out just what they were doing. And that's as just kind of a force multiplier, we were able to help get in there. But it was really the hard work of Whitby that a lot of people saw and resonated with. And to that point, in terms of municipalities, we're also from the town of Whitby all the way to Halton Hills, which we've had a grant out to. Now we're working with municipalities to help them adopt green development standards. There's a number of other municipalities that we're in very early stage talks with, but with the kind of the vanguard action of Whitby, it really helped break the dam that we were seeing in a lot of other major regions around that were kind of reticent to adopt green standards, but now they see that Whitby's done it, they see that Halton Hills and other municipalities are looking at it, and hopefully we'll see really robust and great green development standards throughout all the GTHA, and we can have another major carbon reduction policy platform piece that I can talk to you about next time or in the future. So if we can just go to the last slide. I think. Yeah, last slide. So in conclusion, policy development is never a straight line, and where you can end up sometimes very different from where you started. What we try to do at TAF is to follow the carbon and provide constructive forums, support, and solutions to partners, and to remove barriers for them in order to aid them in pursuing climate policies and carbon emission reductions. And that's it. So I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Evan. Any questions of staff?
Yes, Parminder, it's Councillor. It's Mike Layton here.
Go ahead, Councillor.
If I could, just as a public service announcement, the count in Pennsylvania is going well, and it has switched to Biden's favor. If you haven't been paying attention, I think that happened in the last half hour while that presentation was going on. We can all now breathe a huge sigh of relief for the moment. Listen, thank you very much, Evan and Jade, for the presentation. I think this is a great success story for TAF, as well as for the expansion of stronger green building standards in the GTA. My questions are actually mostly to Jade, and I don't have many. I haven't, ever since kind of the early discussions about what was going on in Whitby, I hadn't paid attention to some of the specifics that were, I wouldn't say hiccups, but that were challenges as Toronto worked through implementation. One was the city of Toronto has moved to a tiered system that automatically ratchets up. So we no longer have to have the fights, and Julia will remember, and TAF was very involved in, I can't remember who was the mayor at the time. I think it was our previous mayor, which made it even more difficult, where we were fighting to raise the standards and make tier 1, tier 2, and invent another tier that was stronger. And now we've come up with a multi-tiered system that seems more complex, but it actually makes it gives builders a certain level of certainty of when they're going to build. They're going to build 2, 4, 5, 8 years out, what the expectation is. And it's I think works really well that it automatically ratchets up. Is that the approach that Guelph took? Whitby.
We hope that Guelph follows suit, so don't worry. So in terms of the automatic ratcheting, like we outlined that is the intent in the report. We will go back to council after the first term for permission to automatically ratchet up. We're in a bit of a weird situation in the sense that this building code we're waiting for the national building code to come out too, and that having a step kind of approach, if it does have a step approach, which we're being promised it will actually help further support it and support the automation of that ratcheting up. So we felt that for the first announcement, no, we'll go back in it will be 3.5 years I don't anticipate there being an issue with ratcheting up from tier 2 to 4. It also gives us an opportunity to tweak the standards a little bit, so we could potentially be more aggressive, and we could add more as new sustainable design features and innovation comes out.
And it's only new build, not on major renovation?
It's actually major renovations that require a site plan application as well. So yeah, it's everything.
So only major renovations that require site plan. Okay.
Correct. Anything that goes through a site plan or a plan of subdivision application will be required to follow the Whitby Green standard. At a minimum, tier 1 must be followed through.
How are we going to get to major renovations when it doesn't require a site plan? Like, I think that's the next step for Toronto too, because we don't have to follow that. I'm really curious because it would, I think it would change the game in just how many retrofits are being done on existing buildings. Julia has a comment to that.
Yeah, I know.
I would.
And I think Brian might have some perspective on that. So the city has commissioned some work about what's next in terms of existing buildings. What are the policy tools that we have? And certainly permit might be sort of a point of entry there. We've talked to the planning department and buildings division about this for many, many years. And so I don't know, Brian, whether there's anything new to report on that. I think the report is coming to the Environment Committee at some point soon, but I think you'll have an opportunity to look at those options. And maybe we can again lead the way in Toronto in terms of approaches for existing buildings that aren't at the site plan level.
Okay, well, go ahead. Sorry, Brian.
I'll just briefly add, I am on the steering committee for TAFT for the existing buildings strategy, emissions strategy for the City of Toronto, and we're looking at a range of potential policy strategies to get existing buildings retrofitted. Some would be triggered by permits, although the challenge there is that the worst performing buildings are the ones least likely to go and apply for permits because they don't undertake renovation activity. So the other approach is more New York style building performance standards, which we also need to explore. We're still in the stage of exploring, the authorities and how they relate to that. So there's a number of options, but certainly things that are being looked at as part of the strategy include performance standards.
Haven't we been exploring the benchmarking for ever since I've been a councillor, and that's now a decade?
No, we have that.
It's from
have a benchmarking requirement, yeah. So
the benchmarking requirement's a critical feature to develop performance standards for existing buildings because it gets you that really broad-based information about how the building stock's performing, which can then help you develop realistic targets as a minimum floor for them going forward. So it's a key input, but again, we're just now getting the wealth of data that's going to allow that analysis.
Just finally, one thing that's been identified as a shortcoming of the city's process is monitoring and ensuring compliance. And it's not just for the green building standards. It specifically elements that aren't captured by, say, engineers' inspections. That seems to be one of the bigger challenges. Perhaps not the greatest example is we have no one that checks if the car share spots are being used for car share or anything else. And we just don't have. It's not in anyone's checklist to go out and say, yes, they're achieving their site plan or their zoning requirements for these awkward other things that all typically fall under the sort of other environmental issues, and we don't monitor it to make sure that the implementation is there on green roofs and stuff like that, for instance. So I would pay extra attention to how you might overcome that shortcoming of the current way we're implementing.
And if I may, the town of Whitby recognizes some of the challenges that there are with the reviewing the after implementation. One thing that we are greatly restricted by is by the fact that our building inspectors are only allowed to review to code. So that really limits our ability to review the energy side of the green standard. But from the broader side of things, because the green standard doesn't just look at energy, it looks at climate resiliency, it looks at health and well-being and other social aspects as well. If it is in the site plan agreement, so the final application, it's essentially a binding contract between the developer and the town. So our engineering inspectors have a copy of that contract, and they are able to inspect and approve and sign off. So things like stormwater resiliency, and again, this is a little easier in low rise in comparison to Toronto, because the town ends up assuming a lot of those features. Our inspectors do have a little bit more teeth there to sign off. But I agree, the building side of things, the energy side of things, is definitely a big challenge that is currently obstructed by current policy.
I think Parminder's having a hard time seeing people through. Not sure. So just speak up, Jacqueline.
I think you have I can't tell. I signed on as the browser application for WebEx or Cisco, sorry, so I can't go to grid mode. Jacqueline, did you have a comment or a question?
Can you unmute Jacqueline? Oh, she can't unmute for some reason. Can clerk help Jacqueline with that? There you go.
Great, thank you. Jade, thank you for such an interesting and valuable presentation. And I was particularly interested in what you were saying about the naysayers. And I wanted to know what would be the number one naysayer comment. And I don't know if this is the appropriate place to ask, but how did you deal with that? Like what did you bring to reduce that?
That's a great question. And I think the number one naysayer pushback came from there's a lot of misconception out there thinking that the City of Toronto has special provisions in order to implement green development standards under the City of Toronto Act, which is actually not true. The provisions for green development standards actually sit within the Municipal Act. So there's a bit of a policy and misinformation. And I've actually even seen this come up again in a recent open letter that was sent to the Minister of Finance as well. So we didn't want to get into a legal battle. We worked closely with our town solicitor over the implementation. And so we just acknowledged those concerns, but felt, that if they were further pursued in a legal context, that we would be able to speak to them fairly clearly. So that would be the number one misconception. The other challenge is we really do get a lot of pushback from not all of the majority of the development community around building above code and our ability to require building above code, which is definitely a challenge we do have. But we can ask. And I think the other piece that we can speak to is not all criteria for energy performance is highlighted within the building code. We can actually improve energy performance of a building without getting into things like the envelope and the building and the actual mechanical and electrical equipment. We can look at things like building orientation. We can look at things like reflective roofing. We do have, under site plan control bylaw provisions, the ability to do things like demand certain ratings for windows. So there's actually quite a lot we can do to help push energy performance that isn't within the building code. And I think that was something also that we had some fairly in-depth discussions during the development of this green standard.
And if I can just build on that, do you reach out to any of the large corporations or entrepreneurs to help you build your cases, or be examples of what it is that you're doing so well?
So that will really be part of our next step. So part of the implementation is now we actually want to demonstrate the benefits of this. We couldn't do that before we had the green standard in place because we were still working on the specific metrics. But one thing we are hoping to do in 2021 is secure some innovative developers that would actually be willing and funding that would actually be willing to work with us to demonstrate and actually monitor the benefits of the voluntary tiers, so the difference between tier 2, 3, and 4, so that we start to have some of that hard data that proves the business case. Right now, the only data available is actually from the Atmospheric Fund, and it's very Toronto-based, and it's based on multi-unit. So there really isn't any kind of tracked, proven evidence here with an Ontario-based case study that can really demonstrate this work, and that will be our next step. And that will help us also then develop the incentive program as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Great work. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. I don't see, again, anyone else for questions. I'd like to just pass on my appreciation and congratulate you guys and pat you on the back for this heavy lift. It seems like these things are always so hard to do, and when you accomplish them, it's such a source of pride. So, and Jade, I have to call you out for your knowledgeable activism. I'm so amazed of you've got all the details, and your activism attitude has really created some great success here. Well done.
Thank you, but it's a win for all of us. The great thing about climate policy is everybody benefits. So thank you all for all of your support.
Well said. Thank you. All right, I'd like to see if someone can move to receive this information to the board. Carol or Jennifer, can you? I haven't.
I don't see anyone. Oh yes,
Councillor
McKelvey raised her hand.
All in favor? All right, the next item is TA 9.3, the draft 2021 consolidated operating budget. This is a report with a recommendation. I'll ask Julia to provide an overview.
Great. All right. So many of you who have been previously on the board in previous years will find that this is maybe a different timing for this item. Generally, we have brought the budget and our business plan at the same time. And that would be in February, once we've had a chance to evaluate our previous year's report and look at what is on deck for the next year. However, we, for a few reasons. One, generally, we're out of sync with the City of Toronto's budget process, and so we've tended to have to provide them with a draft budget that is certainly hasn't been seen by the board in advance of sending it into the city's budget process. Secondly, we do have to provide FCM with a plan for our next year by January 8th, and so we needed to get a bit ahead of our usual cycle in doing so. And then thirdly, we realized that, in fact, because our budget has some very specific drivers, sort of from the revenue side and just what the kinds of items that we would spend the proceeds on, that, in fact, there was no real barrier to creating a budget in this time frame. And it really just, it creates an envelope for us to work with for our business plan. So it really wasn't necessary to have it lockstep with the business plan. So just to sort of respond before you sort of ask why we're bringing it without a business plan, you'll see the business plan in February, and it will. We feel that this gives us enough ambit and enough boundaries for working to put our business plan together. What Rob has provided here, it is he's providing this report to you for consideration and approval. So it basically tries to walk you through all the sort of key drivers from a revenue side and from a spending side. So I will hand it over to him we don't need to, I don't think we need to walk through this in great detail further than what's here. But I'll turn it over to Rob to answer any questions. Oh, before I forget. One thing which did come up in the context of the city's guidance for agencies, boards, and commissions, which I discussed with Parminder and he discussed with the HR and compensation committee, was that there was guidance in terms of performance increases, so performance pay and cost of living increases, to that basically the city has a 0 and 0 policy on that, and then indicated that agencies like TAF, I guess all the other agencies and corporations should apply that if applicable. And what is reflected in this budget, it's in the salary line, is that we have actually included a cost of living increase. We felt that our budget is not tied to the tax base, so it is 0 to the tax base. We are projecting revenues that can support that, and that we didn't feel it was appropriate to erode real salaries, if they're that basically we have built in some cost of living increase. It will be tied to what the actual cost of living increase is. So there's an amount in there that is projected, but what would be offered is tied to the actual cost of living. So that wasn't explained in any of the items, but given city policy, I wanted to make that comment. So if there's any questions, I'll turn it over to Rob without sort of going through each of these points, which hopefully provide some good explanation about each of these lines.
Any questions for Rob in the budget?
Parminder, it's Kim.
Go ahead, Kim.
More of a question, and Julia, thank you for describing this as an envelope, because I was one of the people that kind of went, okay, I'm not uncomfortable with the numbers, but what are we doing within them? So thank you for that positioning. So Rob, the revenue sources that are indicated in here, you'll give us an update between now and February in terms of where, if anything changes based on what the markets, et cetera, are doing now and the next couple of months?
Yes,
if
definitely.
Needed?
Definitely if needed. We the marketable securities, we did our traditional budget of 5.5% on the realized and unrealized gains. Direct investments is there's about $400,000 of new income coming in based on the outflows in this year and early next year. So again, we'll give you an update if they're slowed down, because the direct investments can be delayed because of the COVID effect. One thing to highlight, folks, is the external revenues. We obviously are doing a good job at Towerwise because in the past we've budgeted $500,000 for external revenues, and with this budget we're budgeting $1.6 million from external sources. TAF is obviously attractive, and what we're doing is meaningful. So we are getting no shortage of potential partners to our retrofit program.
And what I'll highlight, and when we were putting together the budget, sort of on that last point, is that generally we've indicated external revenues, but then in the expense line, we've just bundled the proceeds and the external revenues in terms of our program expenses. And so the external revenues, because it's such a big chunk this time, based on proposals that we have out to various potential funders, is we decided that it would be better to show those separately. And it also gives us a discipline in terms of not spending those revenues until they are earned. Whereas it's a bit different with the proceeds in that we make a projection, we project spending them. We can, of course, throttle that back as we did last year. We paused hiring. We've made some adjustments in terms of our grants and program budget, but the discipline of truly not spending anything external revenue until it is actually committed is much more important to keep track when it's such a big number. And it also, when we're looking at it, I want to point out that we've separated that external funding into direct expenses and to staffing. And so when we bundled it together, it raised a really big flag that's like, wow, look at all that, that staffing increase. But we wanted to show that a significant amount of that staffing increase is actually supported by external revenues and will not be hired. Those positions will not be brought on unless we raise the revenue. So it's just a bit of a more complicated looking budget, but it's for the purposes of control.
Thanks, Julia. Any other questions? I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, I've just one question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Carroll.
Well, you just answered my first question, which was the external funding versus revenues. That funding piece, that it is a big jump. So it's based on anticipation of things coming in that are sort of in play, but that you won't hire until they're done. So that really answers my question. That if that doesn't come to fruition, you've got a plan. The only other question I asked then is, this is the first budget where we're really showing this multi-tiered fund now. So in terms of reporting it to the city, have you run up against any challenges in moving this into the city's format and presenting it to the budget committee? Because if so, I'm willing to be an advocate. It may not fit into that template perfectly.
We just adapt it according to whatever the city wants. It's not that big a problem. So
okay.
Fantastic. They have different reporting needs, so we accommodate the big city of Toronto. So
that's great. Any other questions? Just let me know verbally, otherwise I cannot see whether you're physically raising your hand.
Parminder, it's Kim. No question, but if there are no others, I'll make the motion to approve the budget as presented.
Just, I've got one thing I want to address, and then Kim, I'll reach out to you. So just so I understand, Rob and Julia, the kind of language that I use, so it seems like what you are saying is any variable revenue that we've got, primarily this external sources, is directly variable expenses, so they match up. So we don't have any exposure there in terms of not, if we don't see that revenue, that we'll have a shortfall. So that's my understanding. And then on the item here about the deployment of the Canada Fund gradually into equities and fixed income, and the deployment plan for that, has that been developed? I might have missed it. I know I didn't attend all the committee meetings, but where are we with that deployment strategy?
Right. So the investment committee did give us guidance on deployment. It is happening over a 12-month period, longer if, so we'll sort of keep checking in on that. So the whole point was not to time the market, so not just plunking everything right into equities, right into bonds, and we certainly don't have the ability to put it into direct investments before new direct investments are approved and advanced, because it's only in go forward direct investments. So we do have a whole spreadsheet with the where the money goes in quarter 1, quarter 2, 3, 4, and Rob is working with our third-party investment advisor from Proteus Performance Management to do that. And as you'll know, Parminder, you're signing a lot of documents for implementing that. So we have started the deployment with putting funds, Canada funds, into equities with generation. The second tranche will go to Green Chip and NEI, and then the subsequent tranche to Dimensional. And so to basically put it into our equities portfolio, kind of on a mirror image. So Toronto, Ontario, and Canada will, by the end of 4 quarters, have kind of mirror image portfolios on the equities. Yeah. In the meanwhile, it is in our TD Asset Management portfolio, and we're opening a new account. We have conversations to get the paperwork done via the CFO's office to open a new to hire a new manager, RPIA, on the fixed income side. So we're diversifying and sort of deploying over time, and that's what kind of makes the revenue projections a bit more complicated, because it's not just like, here's the portfolio and here's what we can project from it. It's going to be, the portfolio will evolve over the course of the year. So that will need some adjustment, very likely adjustment, variances one way or the other, as based on how that evolves and what the markets are doing.
Yeah, no, and thanks for that, because implicit in that question was I didn't quite get whether the 5.5%, which I think is a fair and reasonable expectation, whether that was applied across the entire endowment, or is it weighted based on how those, because that's the largest piece of funds that we've got now, is the 40 million Canada, and how that kind of applies to that. So that's what it was. Underlying that first question was, okay, what's the plan look like? And then how is the 5.5% applied to the full $90 million, or is it weighted?
Yeah, it's weighted over time for the Canada Fund, because we have a higher stake in the fixed income, and we're gradually redeploying that money to public equities and direct investments. So we had to reflect that in the income.
And so I guess the overall answer, as opposed to just that line, is that the budget that we have built is basically bottom up, top down on each of the 3 funds, and then consolidated. So, that's apropos of having our separate fund accounting approach, but we provide you with a consolidated budget and the city with a consolidated budget for approval.
Great, thank you. That's fantastic. All right, Kim, I'll turn to you to move the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
To accept the budget as approved. As presented. As presented.
All those in favor? I think it's unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you, and well done. All right, the next item is TA 9.4, unaudited financial statements for the third quarter of 2020. Again, I'll turn it over to Julia to provide an overview.
And I'll turn it over to Rob, who put this together with his team, Chris Vincent providing all of the data.
Well, it was a very good quarter, folks. Marketable securities did very, very well. In Q2, we made approximately $5.2 million in realized and unrealized gains. In Q3, we came back at $2.7 million in realized and unrealized gains. The big winners were again generation, and surprisingly, we had Green Chip that made over $1 million, which we haven't seen in a while. And Green Chip is one of our Canadian holdings. So it was a really positive quarter for the portfolio. Direct investments did okay. It was slightly negatively impacted by the fact we've got some delays on disbursements, but the current portfolio is doing well. So we had a very good month at 4.5 million revenues. The program expenses were, if you take out the grants, which are above budget, the program expenses were right in line with budget. So Towerwise has been very, very busy this last quarter, and that reflects in the expenses. Otherwise, right now, at the net revenue over expenditures is $103,000 for year to date. So we are ahead of our budgeted net position by approximately $600,000, and we're just keeping our fingers crossed for Q4.
Thank you, Rob. Does anyone have any questions?
Parminder, it's Kim. Just one comment. Just Rob and Julia, feel free to push back and say not right now, but I have to admit all the volatility everybody we're seeing has made me nervous lately. Do you want to make any comment about the stabilization fund, or is it something to wait?
So the question being, are we going to need to use it this year?
Yes, yes. It sounds like not, but...
As long as we have a good fourth quarter, we should approximately break even. So at this point, that's what I forecast. I budgeted our standard 5.5 for the fourth quarter. So, we've got the gains for the last two quarters, and that was in the forecast. So I think we're okay, depending on how Q4 goes.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? Not hearing anyone. May I have a motion to receive this item for information?
Kareem.
Kareem.
Kareem? Great. Thank you, Kareem. All those in favor? I think that was unanimous. So no, any opposed? I don't see any. The motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item is TA 9.5, minutes from the Investment Committee meeting held on 8th of July, 2020. This is information item. Unless there's any questions, we can probably go to a motion. Any questions on this item?
I don't see any hands on.
Okay, perfect. May I have a motion? Was Councillor Carroll?
Just quickly, these are the minutes, but the confidential item is separate from this, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, yeah, okay. Because I think we are going to want the members who aren't on investment committee to hear that confidential briefing. I just lost track of the agenda because behind my computer I also have CNN on.
Multitasking. and I've got my wife texting me, and I'm saying, okay, not now, not that.
He's probably having a heart attack then, because he may be president before we adjourn. Woo!
Well, anyway, hopefully we'll have 10 minutes to chat about this at the end. Okay, not seeing any questions or anyone wishing to speak on this item. May I have a motion to accept it as information?
Jacqueline.
All right, we do. All those in favor? Great. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you. The next item is TA 9.6, minutes from the, minutes from the investment committee held August 20th. I was going to repeat myself there. This is again another information item. Unless there's some questions, we can move to a motion. Does anyone have any questions or would like to speak to this item? Great, not seeing any. Jennifer, Carol, I don't know what you guys did there. When you put up the committee room, I could actually see everyone on the grid that you have displayed. Unfortunately, I can't put a grid mode on mine. But it seems like there's no questions on that item. So can I see a motion to move this item then? Yeah.
Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Councillor. All those in favor? Great. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you. The next item is TA 9.7, direct investment update and request of 2020, number 4. This report is with recommendations with confidential attachments. So I'll ask Julia to provide an overview and then we go into private session.
I'm wondering, Parminder, whether it would be good to move that one just down and go through, the public items so that you can then just go in camera rather than going back and forth.
Yeah, perfect. Good recommendation. I thought we had made that adjustment. Okay, so I will move to item number TA 9.8, minutes from the Grants and Program Committee held on October 2nd, 2020. Again, this is an information item. Unless there's any questions, we can move to a motion. Any questions on this item, or would anyone wish to speak?
No one.
Okay, great.
Sorry, this is 9.7?
9.8.
9.8.
Okay, sorry.
We're holding down 9.7. Not seeing any questions or desire to speak. May I have a motion to accept this for information?
Jacqueline.
Thank you, Jacqueline. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. All right, I believe all of the next items are 9.7 to 9.9 and 9.10.
No, the 9.9, it can be a public item. There is a confidential attachment, if anybody wanted to discuss that, you would go in camera. So you should probably just check and see.
Great, thank you, Juliet. So item number 9.9, grants and program allocation recommendations. Just seeing if there are any desire to ask questions. Otherwise, we can get a motion on this. No?
I have one overarching question, but it's a public question. I don't need to go on camera.
Great. I'll turn the floor over to you, Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure in public, so as we adopt this item, because it's a big financial item, has someone gone through all of the actors here to know in advance whether or not any of these entities, particularly one of them is a municipality, is going to be delayed in any way by pandemic response?
So Ryan, do you have any perspectives on that?
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so during the grant cultivation process and speaking to these grant seekers in advance, we certainly asked for them to include in their applications any mitigation strategies that would need to be included or considered in terms of impact that COVID might have on their project timelines, as well as the strategies that they use. And so we do see, I would say, a significant shift in particularly the projects that seek to engage members of the public or industry stakeholders on issues related to retrofits, new construction, green building standards, from, of course, going from in-person type of events to virtual events. And to Parminder's comments at the beginning of the of this meeting about the challenge that some of our grantees who recently concluded projects faced in reaching policymakers. We were looking at this round in particular for projects that included within the project teams, the policymakers and decision makers' direct involvement in the projects from the onset. And so, to your point about the city of Mississauga, we're seeing that direct pathway that the staff will have to the decision makers that they're seeking to inform through their work. So I would say that this round certainly does include much more of a consideration of those risks, and we're seeing adaptive strategies.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Chair. That was all I had.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item?
Parminder, it's Kim. I just want to thank you for sending out the confidential piece to this. No question on it, but it's just good to have. Thank you.
Great. So, Ryan, just to follow up on Councillor Carroll's question, so can I conclude then staff is satisfied that the COVID risks are mitigated for the applicants that we're about to approve?
Yes, for the 10 projects that are being recommended, we're satisfied that they do have those mitigation strategies in place and have the capacity to either adapt strategies or timelines as needed.
And Ryan, I really like that strategy of perhaps requiring policymaker participation. Of the 10, was were they all able to do that, or the majority, or?
Well, I think what we see in this round is actually, in the case of those being recommended from, say, the city of Mississauga, the town of Halton Hills, where the policies that they're seeking to inform, I mean, those are municipal policies, and those are being led by the staff with support, of course, from policymakers, and so that was something that we looked for. The Mohawk College project as well has a direct partnership and involvement with the cities of Hamilton and Burlington, and certainly for those others, we were looking for those existing networks and connections to relevant stakeholders. So we were satisfied, and I believe the grants committee was as well, that those relationships were in place.
Yeah, and not all projects that you see in the roster there are sort of policy related or require involvement of municipal staff or sort of have any sort of political level engagement. Some of them are working with industry stakeholders, like the HRAI project, or so there is a mix, but where and we've noted that those delays have often been just because municipalities are tied up with COVID, or even at other levels of government, and so that's the question that the grants team has been asking and looking at in terms of A, their theory of change, B, their implementation strategy, their internal capacities, and I think beyond the external parties that need to be engaged by grant seekers, we are going to be, we have to pay attention, and already seeing some challenges to the capacity of at the community level. So organizations that depend on grants and are really challenged right now, and so just keeping our eye on the community capacity is another piece that is relevant to our granting work, our internal program work, etc.
Okay. So let me ask, if there are no other questions and we don't need to hold this item down for our private session, can we get a motion to approve this?
Councillor
Great,
Carroll.
Sure, I'll move it.
Right. All those in favor then to receive this report and adopt the recommendations of the report? That's great. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. All right, correct me if I'm wrong here now. I believe we've got two items left, 9.7, the direct investment update, and 9.10, minutes from the executive comp committee. Are those the two remaining items, Jennifer and Carol?
Yes.
Okay. Now help me out with the actual, I'm scrolling through my notes here on the motion to go in closed session.
Yes.
Can you put that on the screen?
Yes.
All right, I can read this out then. That the Board of Directors of the Toronto Atmospheric Fund recess its public meeting to meet in closed session to consider the following items. PA 9.7, direct investment update and request. Number 4, as it pertains to financial information supplied in confidence to the Toronto Atmospheric Fund, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group of persons, or organization. And TA item 9.10, minutes from the Executive Compensation HR Committee meeting held August 26, 2020, as it pertains to personal matters about an identifiable person or persons and labor relations or employee negotiations. May I have someone move that motion? Help me out. Did someone raise their hand? Sorry.
Everybody.
Moved unanimously. Anyone opposed? Motion's carried to go in closed session. Clerk's office, let me know once we're set up for that. Councillor Carroll on CNN.
Paminda, you can start your public session now. We are ready.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I believe the items that we need motions on were 9.7, direct investment update and request.
I'll
And
make that motion, Parminder.
thank you, Kim. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Kim. Oh, Julia, you're on mute. I'm not sure if you're trying to say something.
Sorry, it might require the clerk to amend this motion because, as we discussed, the amount is 300. Tim, it's 350,000, not 300.
That is correct.
Okay.
I'll move the amendment, McKelvey.
Through the chair.
I said the amendment.
Which
I said the amendment to
recommendation
Kim.
is that?
Yes. And of course,
Can we put the amendment on the screen then, Jennifer Carroll?
Can you just clarify for us, Mr. Chair, which recommendation this affects? Because we don't have anything in writing, so.
9.7.
Mm-hmm.
And it is to approve an additional direct investment of up to 350,000 in subordinated debt or limited partnership equity units. There are two attached with that direct Vice President impact investment to investing to implement the investment. And the second piece is direct confidential information contained remain confidential.
Can I clarify? So in recommendation number 1, approve an investment of up to 600,000, right? Now we are going to approve another 350,000, right?
No, changing that up to 600 to be up to 350,000.
Okay.
And that's the amendment.
Okay.
Just confirm. That's
So that is the only amendment, right?
No.
Can we also add in that line, in subordinated debt or limited partnership brackets equity units? Sorry, we should have sent this to you ahead of time.
Okay, you're supposed to send them.
Tim and I were going back and forth during the meeting, so.
Okay, then can you please send to us the wording?
Okay, can I propose then, can you guys send that to them and then they can draft it up? I'd like to see it on the screen. And while they're doing that, can we move to the other item and we'll handle that first. So nullify that previous motion and vote for it. So we'll move to 9.10 while we get that one clarified.
Who do we send it to?
I just sent your text to Jennifer Lynn.
Jennifer Lynn.
Yeah,
Okay.
can be jennifer.lin@toronto.ca or TAF board. TAF.
No, we've got it, Jen.
Okay, I think you'll get that. So just going back to then item 910, minutes from the Executive Compensation HR Committee. I believe I saw Councillor McKelvey move the motion there. Was that your intention? To accept those minutes?
Sure. Sounds great. I'll move.
Thank you. All in favor to accept that item? Any opposed? Motion is carried.
All right. So while we're waiting for the amended motion, something that Rich and I neglected to do right at the beginning, because in this virtual meeting format, we don't go around the room and introduce who's here. So Rich, why don't you take this?
Hi, board members and TAF staff. This is Rich Waite from the City Manager's Office. I just wanted to acknowledge on the call and identify my colleague Scott Pasternak, who you can see is he is the new staff legal need liaison to TAF. while we were all working busily, Lorraine Searles Kelly, who many of you know for many years, slipped into a very lovely and earned retirement. So Scott is taking over this file. So welcome, Scott.
Welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
And Scott has a very, not only the legal expertise, but I remember when he joined the city, having worked, was it in the mayor's office in New York City, and working on the climate file there. So but has both legal and mandate-related expertise to bring to the
and program and program.
Yeah.
It's on 7, right?
Yes.
Did you folks get the
Amend item. What's that?
Tim, did you get that to Jennifer?
Oh, I'm on the wrong. We're working on it.
Yes, we received it, but we are working on it, okay? Yeah, because I saw the modification was on summary, we need to make it into recommendation. Yeah, just give us a little bit time.
Bear with me.
Just be a minute.
Okay.
Just let us know when you're ready.
About 1 minute. Jennifer, do you want to come here? Yes. So I'm going to import the recs first.
Mike, Carol, Mike.
Copy.
Where's the board package?
Paste. Is it board@taft.ca? That's who I sent it to?
I think they received it, did they not?
Yes. Yes, we received it, but it seems you changed the summary, but it's like, so do you want to use the wording on the summary to replace the wording in recommendation 1? Yeah, so just give us 1 minute. So we are typing it out and we will put on the screen so you guys can prove it to see whether that is what you want or not, okay?
So, Tim, did you...
I don't know the email address to send it to. I didn't hear it. It got lost in translation in the system.
They've got it, but I would, if it would help you, we could just, if you put up that recommendation, the original 1, 2, and 3, all we need to do is copy what we sent you in the summary into that number 1.
Okay.
Hi, Tim. The email you are looking for is tafboard@toronto.ca. That's TAF board@toronto.ca.
If you put up that recommendation,
just wait.
We'll just take the words that we sent in the summary and we'll just change that.
Yeah, I just sent it. You and Kim and Julia and board at taft.ca should have it.
Okay, so what you've put up, can we just add You've added the subordinate debt. Is it important, Tim, that we put in?
Yes, absolutely.
So can you read that out to them just so they can edit as we're as right up in front of us?
Okay. Okay, let me find it again. Okay.
I've got it right here. Jennifer, can you edit as we talk?
Yes, we can.
So you on number 1 there, you've got approve an investment. It should be an additional investment.
Then we can't see him.
Should I keep talking or give you a minute?
Yeah, just, yes, I will save it and then go out.
This is so hard.
We are trying to do a way you guys can see the editing.
Do you want me just to read it to you and then you can put it back up?
And she's trying to share her screen in real time rather than an actual document. Okay.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
An additional investment of up to $350,000 in subordinated debt, or here's where we add, or limited partnership, equity units, comma, and I think that's it.
Yeah.
Tim, is that good?
Yes, that works.
Thank you, Lynn. Jennifer.
So just to clarify, this is in addition to the 600,000 recommended in the report? No, it's replacing
Actually,
it.
it's in addition to what we approved as the board in 2018.
Okay, so this is accurate, that number 1 in the report is now being replaced with this wording on the screen.
Yes.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure we have it right.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you for this particular motion, and then I'll administer the vote.
And make the motion.
As displayed on the screen, eh? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Was there any opposed? I'm not sure whether Councillor McKelvey was late lowering her hand or...
In favor, late handed.
Okay, thank you. All right, motion is carried as best as I could see.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I apologize for those late amendments and changes, but I think we're good. Any other, I'm just turning to the city clerk's office. Does that take care of the full agenda then?
Yes, we do.
So just a couple of quick information items. Usually we would at this meeting set our meeting dates for next year, but we were not able to do that because council meetings and committee meetings have not yet been scheduled for 2021. So as soon as that's, we're going to look at that with the clerk and get back to everybody so that we can actually have that formally in our February meeting, but just so it gets in people's calendars. And then apropos of the business planning that we said we would be engaging in, there has been some interest expressed to the chair in the context of some of his consultations of being involved in the business planning process. Fatima is working on a process that will involve, that will have opportunity for board engagement, and staff is really looking forward to those opportunities to engage with you. So we'll put that invitation out quite shortly. So look forward to your insights and preferences and ideas, and we'll put that in the mix before we put together the business plan.
Great. Thank you for that, Julia. If there's nothing else, I'd like to say move a motion to adjourn. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your
day. Good job.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.